Labor's always believed in making it easier for business to do business. We've always believed in competitive, productive and profitable enterprises. We believe in successful enterprises that provide Australians with good jobs, secure— Madam Speaker, the member for Keelung's interjecting. He's out of place. Can you please sort him out?
I would remind the honourable Leader of the Opposition that there were many interjections that were—
He's not in his seat.
Now.
He's not in his seat, Madam Speaker. He's not a minister yet.
It is quite right. You're not in, the honourable member is not in his seat, and it does apply, as I have said to others. But I would also remind the Leader of the Opposition that those sitting behind him were far from respectful of the speech given earlier. The honourable Leader of the Opposition.
But, Madam Speaker, they did make some good points. We've always believed in competitive, productive and profitable enterprises. Successful enterprises that provide good jobs, secure jobs, fair pay and decent conditions. We understand the importance of small business. We need no lecture from those opposite. We appreciate the massive contribution that nearly 5 million Australians who own and work in small businesses make to our economy. That is why, when Labor was in power, we established a Minister for Deregulation. That is why previously, despite this sense of golly gee discovery from the Prime Minister that somehow he's the first Prime Minister to ever talk about repealing legislation, we repealed more than 12,000 pieces of redundant legislation, including 7,500 in 2013. That is why Labor initiated the most comprehensive COAG deregulation process to remove much of the unnecessary constraints on our economy across different levels. Madam Speaker, Labor understands the importance of increasing productivity, increasing efficiency and helping put downward pressures on prices in small business. We are committed, in a bipartisan spirit, to the organised and ongoing effort to minimise, simplify and create cost-effective regulation. But indeed, I must speak, and I do not believe the Prime Minister necessarily spoke to this point as much as I expected him to, that we balance against our desire for the goals which I've just outlined to ensure that through our regulatory system we improve competition in this country, that we have quality standards, that we have consumer protections, in particular against fraud. Information is sufficient for people in Australia to be able to operate and make informed decisions in our markets, that we have a clean environment where we tackle pollution, that we have wide access to services across the whole of Australia, not just our cities. We understand that we should have a regulatory system which encourages the start-ups of business, that when people are seeking construction development approvals, they're not tied up in unnecessary green tape. We understand the importance of making sure that our utilities in very strategic parts of our economy provide services and opportunities for the businesses that have to deal with them and the consumers. We are most committed to ensure that in regulated markets, where there is some form of regulation, be it telecommunications, financial services, insurance, that there are in fact proper information sets available for business, in particular small business, so they can make the comparisons which allow them to be able to benefit from the benefits of competition. We're very conscious of state regulations as well, property registration and the like, which can be an obstacle towards businesses succeeding. And that can include the range of issues from registration at state title offices right through to retail tenancies. We understand the importance of credit being able to flow through our economy and making sure that that is not impeded by unnecessary regulation. We are most committed to reforms which will see people spending less time filling out their tax requirements to make sure that people can in fact spend more time making a profit and less time filling in forms. So, Madam Speaker, this matter shouldn't be about partisan point-scoring or ideology. We believe repeal should be diligent, not ideological. That's why this talk of bonfires and war is so remarkably overheated. We don't want— I guess I was talking about that war on corruption, wasn't I? We don't want important protections to be lost under the guise of deregulation. We should have regulations to make sure that our consumers are safe. We should make sure that we have regulations that protect mum and dad investors, a point I will return to. We should have regulations that preserve our pristine natural environment. These are vital. So on the substance of the bills before us, as opposed to the high-blown rhetoric of the Prime Minister, the statement of motherhood principles, let me talk first of all about the government's proposition to abolish the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission. I am concerned that the government is proposing to repeal a body that not only has the support of the sector that it regulates, but also reduces red tape. The member for Bass says no. The member for Bass isn't in his seat. He's interjecting. I don't know what's going on over there. To repeal the Australian Chamber of to repeal the Australian Charities Commission, you'd think that the charities sector would be calling for its removal and shouting about the red tape burden. But the reverse is true. Today, the Abbott government has managed to unite 54 leaders from the charities sector, and that government, they love their charities. They'll turn up at the opening of a charity. No doubt that when it comes to the photo opportunity, these are charities' best friend. But when it comes to the red tape and protection of charities, missing in action, no appearances. And the reverse is true. We have 54 leaders from the sector taking the unprecedented action of issuing an open letter to retain the current framework. And let me say, this is courageous by these charities. We know what a vindictive, punishing mob they are. And let me just say, those 54 charities, for daring to disagree with this mob opposite, we will be watching you to see if you punish them, because that is your form guide. Indeed, as some opposites seem to think that the charity sector is in love with their propositions, let me quote.
The member for Bass.
The Minister for Social Services says it's only 54 out of all of them. Well, let me go through some of the 50. Minister for Social Services, say nothing. Let me say what some of these 54 that the Minister for Social Services who deals with them so disrespects their right to have a separate opinion to his own. Tim Costello says the Commission is actually working for us and it gives the public confidence. It underpins the consumer benefit to charities. Watch out for World Vision's funding, I would say now, in the light of that comment. Then we look at the Australian Centre for Philanthropy and Non-Profit Studies, Professor Miles McGregor-Lowndes at QUT. During its short history, the ACNC has played a positive role in the overall regulatory environment of charities, and it's well placed to continue that role. In the short term, it provides the infrastructure for a one-stop shop for the Commonwealth regulatory requirements and a dedicated force to work with other Commonwealth agencies to streamline their present arrangements. It's stellar improvement in terms of timeliness, consistency of decision-making and responsive to emerging issues of previous ATO functions surpasses the sector's original high expectations. Then we've got all sorts of other groups. David Crosbie, Chief Executive of the Community Council of Australia. He has said that the Charities Commission is more efficient than the government regulators it replaced. It's doing good work. It deserves a chance to achieve its three goals of reducing red tape, a goal which the Prime Minister rhetorically dedicated himself to this morning, increasing public trust and strengthening the charities sector. And I know the Prime Minister is a strong rhetorical supporter of our charities sector, and I congratulate him on his Polly's pedal. Axing the Australian Charities Commission would be a very clear— I should just say David Crosbie didn't congratulate him, that was me. The Charities Commission would be a very clear sign that government is not interested in the considered views of the charities sector. Now, there we go. Louise Walsh from Philanthropy Australia. That's another nest of Marxists, according to the ideologues over there. She says, Louise Walsh, the CEO, since the Charities Commission establishment as an independent charities regulator, Philanthropy Australia has consistently supported its important role in our community. The ACNC has only existed for just over a year. So far, the progress is promising, and we want it to be given the opportunity to realise its full potential. There you have it. That's what the 54 people that the Minister for Social Services just indeed dismisses. What are these people ever to do to be dismissed by you except dedicate their lives to looking after other people? What an arrogant chap you are. Anyway, this Charities Commission goes on to show that when it comes to this government, when they are evaluating a beauty parade between ideology and pragmatic, moderate common sense never wins. In August 2013, a pro bono survey— more than just 54 here, now maybe this might change the Minister for Social Security's random remark that he made before. In August 2013, a pro bono survey of over 1,500 members of the not-for-profit sector found that 81% supported the ACNC. That would be more than 1,200, Kevin. Only 6% of the survey respondents in the charitable— the member for Menzies. Only 6% of the survey respondents in the charitable sector supported a return to the ATO as a default regulator. The not-for-profit sector employs over 1 million Australians. It turns over about $100 billion, involves almost 5 million volunteers and is the heart of all of our communities. The Productivity Commission in their Henry Tax Review recommended a National Charities Commission. The Productivity Commission, so beloved of the government, declared the previous regulatory framework to be complex, lacking coherence and transparency, and costly to charities. Abolishing the Charities Commission is an insult to taxpayers who want to see where their donations go. It's an insult to charities who will lose their visibility and governance support. It's bad for the public who will be vulnerable to more frauds and scams. So on the Charities Commission, we have on one hand the government with high-blown rhetoric talking about how much it wants to cut red tape, but when it actually has a chance to turn its words into deeds, there the Abbott government and the Prime Minister don't live up to their own rhetoric. But there's a second example of where the government is inconsistent with the rhetoric of the Prime Minister's opening speech, and yet when it comes to turning good words into good actions, they go missing. I talk, of course, about the future of financial advice. What a disturbing proposition from the government. The Assistant Treasurer, with the support of the Prime Minister, is determined to reduce the protections of mum and dad investors. The Assistant Treasurer was up front during Senate estimates about his game plan to prescribe new regulations to dismantle the current consumer protection laws as soon as the parliament rises next week with immediate effect, so there will be no parliamentary scrutiny of these changes, none. Putting aside Labor's concerns about the substance of the Assistant Treasurer's changes, we are most agreed with the process here. This is all about pulling the wool over the eyes of Australian investors. Just as bad, the financial services sector faces the very real prospect of having to deal in a short period of time with competing different regulatory regimes. The regulations that take effect from the 27th or 28th of March, the current laws, if the regulations are disallowed in the Senate, then whatever legislative landscape we end up with after the 1st of July, when the parliament has dealt with the government's legislation. This is a red tape nightmare dreamed up in the fevered imaginations of the Prime Minister of Australia. The Assistant Treasurer appears to be proceeding in a ham-fisted manner without any regard to the outcomes. Labor went through numerous rounds of consultation to refine our policy, and for the benefit of some of the new members of the coalition who mightn't have been in parliament with the events that triggered this current round of consumer protection law which Labor put in place, it followed the collapse of the Storm Financial, Bernie Ripoll's PJC inquiry into that, and put legislation to parliament that it debated and inquired and passed. So, having seen the lessons of Storm Financial, those people opposite turn their back on the experience of history, and I cannot say when the next financial disaster will happen, and I cannot say who the victims will be, but I know one thing. Because of what you are doing, you are guaranteeing another Storm Financial, and upon your heads it will rest. And we will hold you responsible for your abandonment of basic common sense when it comes to consumer protection. This is dodgy law done in a dodgy way, which will lead to dodgy outcomes. If you want to make the changes, make the case via legislation. Front up and have a parliamentary inquiry. We saw what happened in Storm Financial. We saw what happened in West Point. High-profile collapses where in certain instances investors were lured into these investment products because financial planners were receiving hidden commissions to promote these products. Our financial laws, which you are seeking to dismantle, would protect consumers with a best interest duty. They would be opt-in, requiring advisors to get their clients to opt-in to receive ongoing service every 2 years. Annual disclosure. Somehow annual disclosure is a bad idea. Conflicted remuneration. We put the government on notice that on one hand they want to reduce red tape, and I've outlined why we think as a principle that's a sound principle, but we put this government on notice, this Abbott government on notice, that we do not want to effectively decriminalise and deregulate financial fraud in this country. Madam Speaker, we are a constructive opposition. We will give the package they say a careful consideration. We support the repeal of redundant 1901 legislation. We will not allow important protections to be recklessly cut. Labor stands for the protection of consumers, for the protection of workers, for the protection of investors. Markets are fundamental. But one economic lesson which we all know in this place is that markets periodically need the help of government. Regulations protect abusers. We have a proud record of removing the unnecessary regulations, but we will be guided by the interests of all Australians, not just blind ideology.